Today I want to talk about disappointment, how to handle the inevitable disappointments that come from running your online business. Now, I know this isn't going to be the most popular topic. This video will probably not go viral because we tend to want to hear about how to make millions online. I can teach you how to do that. But if you were my private coaching client and we're on a coaching call together and all I ever talked about was how to win, how to improve, how to make money, how to blah, 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 blah. That's all well and good. But if I never allow you and me to talk about that big failure that just happened in your business last week and how to navigate those feelings of disappointment that you have, I'm going to be doing you a disservice. So in the same way, here on this channel, I don't only want to talk about the good and the upside. I feel like it's valid and valuable to share both sides of the coin because it's not all Care Bears and rainbows. There's disappointment along the way. Now, I don't want this channel to become doom and gloom, although I could easily go there. My personality kind of tends that way a little bit if I let myself. But I do think this is a part of the process of running an online business is learning how to face and deal with failures, disappointments, and setbacks. If you think about if I put entrepreneurship into a big like apple basket, probably 20% of that is going to be disappointment, right? There are going to be things that aren't working, maybe more, depending on what season you are in your business. I've had seasons where it felt like every day was filled with disappointment. I'm currently experiencing some deep feelings of disappointment about a current thing I'm doing with my business, Home Studio Corner. So it never ends, but you learn to better process and deal with those things. So that's what I want to share with you today, the things that I do when I inevitably face disappointment. One of my favorite phrases I learned from Jim Collins in his book, Good to Great. If you don't own it, go get it. He did a lot of research on successful companies in the last half of the 20th century. It's fascinating stuff. But he basically shares with you a lot of the key similarities that he discovered through his research of these successful companies. And one of the similarities is they all had a tendency to face the brutal facts of reality. That's the phrase he kept using, the brutal facts of reality. Facts can sometimes be brutal, and companies that were willing to face those brutal facts and respond to them appropriately were the ones who were more successful versus the ones who maybe ignored the brutal facts. When my car makes a weird sound as I'm riding down the road, I'd rather just crank up the radio and ignore the problem. But we all know that typically never helps and probably only makes it worse. So I want you and I to get into a habit of facing the brutal facts of our reality in business. By the way, this advice applies to regular old life as well, not just running a business. But facing what's true, what the brutal facts of reality are, is really the secret sauce to overcoming any obstacle in our business and to achieving long-term sustained success. Okay, so let's get into some specifics. What does that look like? Face brutal facts. Well, let's talk about a couple of things. First of all, let's talk about those feelings of disappointment as they come. When I expect something to go one way, and it goes a different way. I expect a video to do well, and it bombs. I expect a promotion to do well, and it bombs. Really, just anything bombing. I get all kinds of emotions from that. Now, by the way, talking about this, I have a lot of experience with, I feel things deeply. I'm what you might call a highly sensitive person. That's like a psychology term. I've dealt with depression and anxiety. I've done a lot of therapy. I've actually been on medication for that at certain seasons of life. So I don't come at this from a flippant standpoint of, you got some emotions, no problem. Like I deeply respect how deeply we can feel emotions. Maybe that doesn't resonate with you and you think, it's fine. But I think at some point when you get into creating your own business, especially a business like this, a business where the brand really is me, when things go wrong in the business, it's sometimes hard to separate that business from who I am as a person. So business has a failure. It's hard not to see myself as that failure. So there's a lot of deep emotions that come up, a lot of sadness, a lot of shame, a lot of embarrassment, and maybe even some guilt that I should have known this wasn't going to work, and I should have known how to fix it. A lot of insecurity, a lot of that can come up. What happens when those emotions bubble up? Well, there's kind of two responses you can take to the emotions themselves. The first is you can ignore them, right? You can just say, back off, and you can stuff it, right? we all know deep in our hearts that doesn't work, right? You can stuff an emotion down, it's only going to come out sideways. Think of like Play-Doh. It comes outside. So a better option is to face it. But the other thing we can do with the emotions, there's kind of two negative options, I guess. There's one side of the coin is you just ignore them altogether. That doesn't work out well. The other side of the coin is you can just spiral. This is the one I'm really good at. I will take some sort of a failure, some sort of a disappointment, and I will spiral hard sometimes, taking that to mean that I am a loser, that I should quit everything altogether because of this failure that happened. In hindsight, when you're not in the midst of it, it seems silly. But in the moment, those feel like the only two options. I can either stuff this and I'm going to explode later and be mean to my wife and kids because this thing in business is frustrating me, or I can spiral and go to a really unhealthy, negative place. But what is there like a third option that's better? Obviously, the third option is to face the emotion. But how do you do that? Part of it is you allow yourself to feel it. Allow yourself to feel disappointed. For a lot of people, I feel like especially men, but I feel like just in general, for a lot of people, we get this message. Maybe no one said it explicitly, but it seems like there's this message of don't be emotional. Don't feel that way. You shouldn't feel that way. Well, guess what? We do feel that way, and we got to deal with it. And part of that means just accepting it and feeling that really sucks, and I'm really mad about it and angry, and I feel a little ashamed that this thing didn't work the way I wanted it to work. You got to allow yourself to feel that. You don't have to spiral. You don't have to ignore it. But I think there's a happy middle ground where you feel what you're feeling and allow yourself to feel it a little bit. A friend of mine, Jason Moss, he's a coach for coaches. And I've seen him write about this several times in his emails where he talks about like placing your hand over your heart and just allowing yourself to feel your heartbeat and feel whatever emotion you're feeling. If that's too woo-woo for you, okay, fine. Find a way to allow yourself to feel some things when you feel them. Then the thing I do next, a lot of times I'll do this feeling on paper. So like I've got this remarkable tablet I'll journal on, or just a regular old journal with a pencil. I'm surrounded by writing devices. I typically will allow myself to feel that on paper. That helps me process. But then the next thing that I'll do, and this is probably the most helpful piece of that, is I feel it. I may even let myself spiral for 5 minutes. And then I kind of take a breath and I answer this question. What's true? It's a pretty powerful question. What is true about this thing that I'm feeling? So we've talked about what's true emotionally, but what's just true in the real world? What's true is I expected this thing that I did to achieve X result, and it achieved Y. I wanted it to sell a whole bunch. It sold 2. I spent an inordinate amount of time and effort on this video, and it's the worst video I've released over my last 10 videos. Right? It's things like that. I spent a lot of time pursuing this person to become a client, and they said no. They were nice about it, but they said no. I've got a client that I've been working with, and our term was up, and I said, hey, do you want to renew and keep working together? And they said, maybe later. So we're just talking about what is true. And in doing that, we can say, okay, all right, so it's true that this thing did not sell like we wanted it to sell. Okay, what do we think are the reasons for that? And then we say, what's true about the way I promoted this, or the way that I created the video, or the topic of the video itself, or the way that I'm approaching selling my coaching packages? What's true about them? And we just kind of go down this path of like bullet point, what's true, what's true, what's true. Because what you'll find is, while it may be true that I feel like a loser, what's true is, I did these things, that could have been better, this didn't work the way I wanted. But if I'm able to look at it without allowing myself to be overwhelmed with the emotions, so I let myself feel it, then I let myself actually take a good look at it, I notice, okay. I have some ideas of why that didn't work, and some things that I want to change next time, or things that I'm going to try the next time that I do this to hopefully avoid these results that I'm getting. Or perhaps you learn, man, we tried that thing and that thing didn't work, so we're not going to do that anymore. Like it was tried, didn't work. We're going to say that's not for us anymore, and we move on to something else. The end result, you don't even have to necessarily come up with all the answers, but just having a kind of a fact-finding session of, okay, what's actually true here? What are the brutal facts? What's true about what's happening right now? It becomes a lot less emotional and a lot more analytical, which we can process that a lot more easily than we can these complex emotions that come up. By the way, the thing I'm talking about here, this idea of like asking what's true and measuring what's happening, that's the third step of my game plan. So I have a business game plan. It's a summary of the business model that I use for my business and have for the last 15 years. I've got a guide that you can have. It's a free downloadable single-page PDF that shows you that model. It's a 4-step model. Comes with a masterclass video that explains the whole thing. I'd love to give it to you for free. Just go to joegilder.biz/game to get your free copy. Because what we're talking about right now is the last half of that, which is to measure and to edit. So to look at what's happening and then to make changes accordingly. If we allow ourselves to get too caught up in feeling things and we never actually look at the brutal facts and we never make any changes, guess what? We're doomed to repeat our failures again and again. So there's a level of, first we need to feel what's happening, ask ourselves what's true. And then the next piece of it is we got to kind of disconnect from it. So imagine that you are my coach and we sit down for our coaching call and I start to tell you about this recent thing that happened in business that just really disappointed me. And I tell you all the facts, I tell you all the things that I'm feeling. And what is your response? Like what's happening inside of your body as you're listening? You might feel a little empathy for me, right? You might feel bad for me. You might be sad that I had this experience that's been affecting me negatively, but you're not going to take it personally, right? If I say, hey, I ran a promo and it bombed, you're going to say, whew, that sucks. Been there. Feel bad for you. But you're not going to start to spiral yourself, right? It doesn't affect you. It has nothing to do with you in a very literal sense. So you're disconnected from it in that sense, right? You can look at it and say, okay, I see what you're saying. I get that it's hard, but I can look at all the data points, all the numbers without feeling all kinds of insecurity about it because it's not even your business, right? In the same way, we've got to do that with our own business. It's helpful if you have someone else to have these conversations with, either a coach or for me, a lot of that happens with my spouse. She is my sounding board. She is my anchor. She keeps me grounded when I want to fly off into the emotional abyss. But she's also just a great sounding board to say, hey, here's all the things that are happening. Am I crazy? Do you see anything here? Am I missing something? And she's a great voice for that. Having a coach is the same idea. When I share that with my coaches, they can say, oh, cool, I see what you're saying. I see how hard that is. Here's what I see from a practical standpoint. They're able to look at it as if it's a puzzle, right? Oh, look, here's a puzzle. These pieces are out of place. But I can see what's missing and I can see the path to getting those pieces in place. They're able to almost gamify this whole business thing. That's what I've been doing with my coaching clients. I'm able to say, what's going on with you? Where are your big disappointments? Where are you struggling? Where do you see the biggest opportunity? And they can kind of lay it out for me. And because I'm not so close to it and I'm not so attached to it emotionally, I can look at it very calmly, almost coldly, but not really, but like from a distance, and I can say, oh yeah, I can see where things are going wrong. I had a call with a friend the other day. He kind of laid out a bunch of stuff in his business that was not going the way it had been going really well, and then it stopped working well. And we're able to kind of, after asking a bunch of questions, able to say, well, these two things seem like obvious places we need to focus. And he was like, oh, you're right. He just was so close he couldn't see it. And he was able to go make one change that like saved him like $3,000 a month in this thing that was causing him a lot of heartache and stress. And immediately his whole like, we were texting back and forth. His whole like attitude was like, you could hear the deep breath that was there. Am I a genius? No, I'm just someone outside of his circle that can look in and see things more clearly. So why am I telling you this? Do you need to go get a coach? Sure, maybe, but you also just need to develop the ability to disconnect from what's happening and kind of hold it out at a distance so you can say, all right, okay, here's what I see. Here are the things that happened. I can see where things started to fall apart. It's almost like a game. If you can disconnect your emotions from your business enough to be able to look at it seriously, face the brutal facts, and also just hold it in your hand and say, man, that's not working. I wonder what we can do to fix that. It's such a different thing. Sometimes I'm jealous of, even in Jim Collins' book, Good to Great, it's all these big publicly traded companies. So they talk about all the leadership, the CEO and all the executives and the board of directors and how they would get into a room and they would hotly debate the topics and the issues before they decided what to do next for the company. And a part of me is really jealous. I wish I had 12 people in this room to look at my business and to debate what's happening and to figure out what the next direction needs to be. For most of us, that's never going to be the case, right? Home Studio Corner will never be a publicly traded company. That's not the trajectory. But the idea of what makes the board of directors so appealing is that they're kind of an impartial third party. They can look at it without being all wrapped up in how they feel about it, and they can just say, well, here's what I see. And based on my experience and what I see from the outside looking in, this is the best move forward. So if you can, the more you can develop the ability to do that yourself, maybe invite a few friends in, maybe hire a coach. I'd love to work with you. Go to wrong website. Go to joegilder.biz/apply if you'd like to apply to work with me one-on-one with coaching. But whatever you can do to give yourself the ability to rip that business out of your heart for a second and put it over here so you can just look at it and see what's happening, the better off you'll be. I heard this phrase from Myron Golden, and he said, if something's not working, meaning something's not working in your business, then it must be working on you. He said it's either working or it's working on you. That sounds nice when you're in the thick of it. It kind of sucks if someone walks up to you and says, well, this is working on you. It's kind of like in Christian circles when someone says, oh, all things work together for the good of those who love the Lord. And this person's like in the middle of this hardest tragedy. They don't want to hear that in the moment, right? However, hopefully you're listening to this right now. You're not in the middle of some big, huge ordeal. And you can hear that the next thing that you try, it will either work or it won't. Both are possibilities. And if it doesn't, there's a good chance that there's something there for you to learn. So it didn't work, but hopefully it can work on you and help you be better whichever direction you go. That hopefully gives you a lot of freedom to just go try some things. Put some things out there and see what works and what doesn't. Instead of being so wrapped up in the failures and defining yourself by them, there's a Michael Jordan quote that says, I missed this many game-winning shots, I lost this many games, I failed a lot, and that is why I succeed. I butchered the quote, but that idea is there. You got to put yourself out there. You've got to fail. Learn from the failures. Hopefully don't make the exact same mistakes over and over and over again, and then continue to put yourself out there. Having been in business for 15 years, that's a long time, especially in online business world. And I've had seasons where things aren't working and I'm just too stubborn to make any changes because I just want to do what I've always done. Sometimes that doesn't work. Sometimes you've got to make some adjustments. You've got to shift. You've got to hold things out at an arm's length and really take a look at it. Final thing I want to talk about is perspective. There's a great quote from Zig Ziglar, and he says, failure is an event, not a person. Failure is an event, not a person. What does he mean by that? Failure is just a thing that happens. It in no way defines you as a person. I can fail at something. That does not make me a failure. At the same time, we have to be honest about our failures. I might have had a lot of failures. It's not that we're giving everybody a prize. Everybody gets a gold medal. You're doing great. You might be doing terrible, right? You might be doing, but that doesn't mean that your worth as a person is out the window. It just means right now, the stuff you're doing isn't working. That's all it means. And you can make changes to make that happen. And one of the ways that you help maintain perspective, especially if you're in one of those seasons where you're slogging it out and a lot of things don't seem to be working, go back in time and give yourself time to think through the successes that you've had, the things that you have done and are doing well. Because at the moment, right now, I can think of something right now that I'm disappointed about. And it can, if I let it, consume my thoughts, give me stress dreams at night, mess with my stomach, fill me with anxiety. If I let it, it can become huge. But it's really only like this. And then if I let myself zoom out to where it's this big, then I can see all the other things that I have done and am doing that are working well. It's something that Dan Sullivan and Ben Hardy talk about in the book, The Gap and the Gain. I've not read the whole thing, but it's just what I've read has been really powerful. This idea of instead of measuring myself against the gap, the difference between where I am and where I want to be, I can measure myself in the gains, looking behind to see the things that I've done well. Because yes, I may have a bunch of failures in my past, but I also have a bunch of successes, a bunch of things that I've done well. And that can help me kind of calm down and recenter myself and say, yeah, there's a bunch of failures recently and that sucks and we're going to figure it out. But I have a history of figuring some things out. I have done this before. I have some confidence in myself in this business because I know that while I have failures, I also have successes. I have done things well. I do know a thing or two about this. I don't have to quit and give up. That doesn't mean that maybe you don't have massive areas of weakness that you need to work on. That may also be true, but you don't have to throw the entire thing away because you experienced some failures. If you like videos like this, would you do me a favor? Would you be sure to like and subscribe to this channel, especially early in this life cycle of this channel? Your subscription really matters, and if you would share it with a friend, that would be super helpful as well. If you don't have my free guide, the Business Game Plan, go to joegilder.biz/game to get your free copy of that. And if you just want to watch another video from me, this one about stop waiting for permission is definitely what I would have you watch next. Thanks so much for spending some time with me today. I'll see you in the next one.